When I read Michael Pollan's The Omnivore's Dilemma, I developed a deep appreciation for all the necessary components that form a food system and found a second career in that field. The food system represents all of the people, businesses,
pleasure in cooking.
government entities,
When I read
and nonprofits that grow, move, manufacture, distribute, consume, and dispose of food along its life cycle. Never has the food system been so dramatically upended as with the coronavirus pandemic. Today, I am going to talk to you about what we can do now to weather the continued impact on the food system and on the ability of people to acquire food. I'll be giving you some background information, in particular on food pantries and community meal programs, and then some suggestions on how we can all contribute to keeping our food supply strong and making sure that we bring as many people to the table as possible. COVID-19 disrupted the food system and impacted supply in an unprecedented way. It's global in scope, meaning that there is no part of the country or the world that is unaffected by it. Because the virus is asymptomatic when people are infected and there's a shortage of testing, we can't monitor and maintain safe workplaces. And the nature of food work and food consumption does not fit well within the constraints of social distancing and staying in one place. Farm labor and production involve a lot of people, and therefore is challenging to control a safe distancing approach. The wide-scale distribution potentially spreads disease as well as food, and we get food in close proximity to each other in stores and in restaurants. And finally, we all need food to survive, so the demand is unlimited and unflagging. As consumers, we are feeling the effects and the challenges we are facing in getting food. Stores requiring safety precautions and have new rules that aren't very convenient. There are limited choices and scarcity in some products. We have mobility issues for people to shop freely, and delivery is in high demand and hard to come by. This reality is new to many of us, but it is not for hundreds of thousands of people living in Connecticut. Before the pandemic, 40% of Connecticut residents didn't make enough to meet their basic needs, which of course includes food. As a result, a large number of people rely on food pantries and community meals as part of their way of putting food on the table. Here's a quick explanation of how food distribution works. Food banks are the big aggregators of food, receiving truckloads of donated products, government commodities, and food purchase. In Connecticut, there are two major food banks. They are the Connecticut Food Bank and Food Share. They each have parts of the state for which they are responsible. The Connecticut Food Bank services Fairfield County, among other places in the state. Food banks depend on food pantries and community meals to get food into the hands of actual people. Food pantries provide groceries. Community meal programs provide meals to be eaten on site. Community meal programs will serve all who walk through the door as often as they come. Food pantries are more restrictive. The days and hours of operation vary and depend on volunteer availability, so it might not be at a convenient time for the people who need the food. They may only let people shop once a month, or twice a month, or weekly, depending. They may restrict by zip, only serving people living in certain towns or neighborhoods. They determine how much food you may receive, and whether or not you can choose what you want varies wildly. There were, at last count before the virus, around 80 different pantries and community meal programs operating in the Bridgeport area. They range in size and capacity, and they are spread out across neighborhoods, which is helpful given that many people don't have cars. Before COVID, tens of thousands of people received close to 1 million pounds of food each month in the greater Bridgeport area alone. Food pantries and community meals do more than provide food. The money that people can save by availing themselves of donated food is money they can use for other fixed costs. And now the demand is growing exponentially. Just this morning, there were hundreds of cars lined up in Hartford's Rentschler Field to receive 40,000 pounds of produce. They were lining up as early as 6 a.m. for an 8:30 drive-through distribution. Adding to the increased demand are the specific challenges that are pandemic related: social distancing, stay-at-home orders, constricted supply, and a volunteer base that is predominantly made up of seniors. Despite all of this, over 90% of the agencies are still open. The reality of the food insecure is going to extend to many more people due to the economic fallout from COVID-19. People who never needed a food pantry or community meal program and whose children didn't need free or reduced school meals do now or will as the economy sheds more jobs? It could be me in the future, or you, or our family members, neighbors, friends. And as we don't know how long it will take for the economy to open up and for jobs to return, we need to be prepared for a marathon and not a sprint. This may sound bleak, but there is actually a lot we can do to ensure that everyone has a place at the table and support the local food system. The key is to put more food out into the food supply and to bring more people in to receive it. We can start with our and how our food sourcing behavior can strengthen the supply side of the equation. Here are some suggestions. First, don't buy more than you need. Our supply is recovering from the spate of panic buying, and we are a couple of weeks out from closer to normal. It will limit your time in the stores and receiving deliveries, which not only lessens your impact on the supply, but also decreases the number of people in stores and increases available delivery times for others. Also, some people only have the money to shop when their unemployment comes in or their SNAP dollars. And if the shelves are empty when they have money to spend, they are in trouble. Second, buy from our local farmers. We need to be as self-sufficient as a region as possible. Sport Hill Farm, Sherwood Farm, and Shaggy Coos in Easton are just a few that are doing curbside or have an unmanned farm store people can enter one at a time. You can grow your own food and you can control your food waste as well. The more we stretch what we have, the less we strain the food supply. Next, we can concern ourselves with the demand side of the equation and ways we can help make sure that no one goes hungry. As mentioned, we have to be in it for the long haul, which means we have to stretch the dollars we are spending to help others, just as nonprofits like mine do when we are purchasing food. I look to do two things: take advantage of economies of scale and have broad economic impact when purchasing. Let's start with the first, economies of scale. As you know, the more you buy of something, the less expensive it is. And the more people you board to pool resources, the more you have to spend on larger scale purchases. Additionally, the more space you take up on a truck, the less expensive it is to transport. The second, have broad economic impact. The more this effort can support local farmers, restaurants, retailers, and distributors and their employees, the better. It means more people and businesses have the means to survive. As a metric, food pantries and community meal programs feed on average between 30 to 100 individuals or households each time they are open. The best way to support them is to provide enough for everyone and the specific products they can't get from the food bank. Here are some suggestions. First, get a group of people together to pool resources. It will allow you to buy more together and hopefully keep giving longer. Second, consider adopting a food pantry or a community meal program, by which I mean work one-on-one with a single agency. This will allow you to provide exactly and how much they need to operate. It also allows for streamlined delivery because you can order as a group and have the food delivered directly to the agency. In my work at the Council of Churches, I've been encouraging our member congregations to adopt agencies, and so far 7 agencies have been adopted by 8 congregations. And finally, purchase your donated groceries through a farmer, a restaurant, or a distributor to get the pounds or number of products you need to scale for an agency and get the best price. For example, Baldor, which is a produce distributor, will home deliver cases of produce with a minimum $250 purchase. Restaurants are already purchasing for their takeout business. You can see if you can piggyback on orders with them. Not only do you get a discount on the items you purchase in bulk, but you and the restaurant or distributor cut transportation costs the closer you get to the truck. Talk to your farmers and see about buying in bulk from them as well. And finally, bringing in, we need to make sure that everyone has access to food, comfortable in receiving help. Here are some suggestions. First, don't forget the smaller agencies. People are restricted in terms of travel, and we have to remember to replenish the supplies of many different nodes on the food distribution chain. Second, if you can do it safely, bring a friend or a family member to a food distribution site. or if you are going yourself, encourage others to do so. And finally, after the restrictions are lifted, consider organizing supper or food buying club or group gardening projects to not only help your bottom line, but lend a hand in our community that will surely be feeling the economic impact long into the future. Here are some resources that should help. On Facebook, the farms I mentioned are posting what foods they have available and how to work their curbside delivery system. If you're interested in adopting a pantry, you can email me at michellemmccabe@ccgb.org and I can connect you to a number of different agencies. There are distributors in state that you can contact to discuss ordering cases of product from them. And then finally, if you yourself or someone you know is in need of a food pantry or community meal program, visit Connecticut's 211 site, which is 211ct.org, where you can type in your address and it can indicate all of the agencies that are nearest. Although I would recommend that you call first because it's a moving target with agencies that sometimes have to temporarily close to sanitize or have to close for a longer period of time. And finally, visit your local school district website to learn more about the school meal distribution setting. Each district is distributing grab and go breakfasts and lunches and some for dinners as well. While it is unfortunate that we are being schooled by a pandemic, we do have an opportunity to become better food consumers, cultivate a stronger local food economy, and adopt a conscientious responsibility to bring everyone to the table that hopefully will continue beyond the pandemic. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for Michelle or comments? You can type them out in the chat. Okay, what about food waste? Is there a question? We waste 40% of our food waste. Can we get it to people?
Well, I can say that the way that we in this area of food waste, I don't know how familiar everyone is with the inverted pyramid to address food waste, but it's a guideline for how we can minimize the enormous amount of food waste, as the person in our chat box has pointed out. Prior to the COVID pandemic, there were opportunities for food pantries, for example, to connect directly with retailers, such as a grocery store, and coordinate days and times for them to pick up excess or food waste that the grocery store culls, let's say, from the produce section. At the moment, there is not a food waste that's happening, at least at the retail level. And the food banks are reporting that donations from retailers is way down. So it seems like at the moment, some of the primary means that we can control is on an individual level. I will also say that I don't know how many of our listeners were aware of the article that appeared in the New York Times last weekend that detailed farmers that are being forced to plow under their crops and dairy farmers that are disposing of their milk because of the effects of the on the marketplace. There is word out today that the federal government is going to be purchasing those products and making them available through the food banks for food distribution, which is really good news. I don't know the details of it yet.
Yeah, someone actually did mention that about the plowing under. And how about restaurants, as well as, the private homes? How do they get the food to be donated?
Well, I'm just not sure I quite understand the question. Are we asking about where people can or restaurants can donate excess food?
Yeah, so not just, stores that, have a crate of bananas or, packaged goods, but, prepared food. Are they able to donate that kind of food?
Yes. So I do want to say with a caveat, I don't know what the impact of COVID has had on food waste generally. So I think it's fair to say that it's a whole new world out there, because obviously restaurants and vendors have had to adjust their food procurement in it entirely to address this new world that we're living in. So I don't know how much excess food is out there at the moment, but I will say that there are stations such as Food Rescue US that work with restaurants, and they connect agencies like a food pantry or a community meal program with that donated food through a network of volunteer drivers that they have. And so that, at least in the old days, was how excess food was distributed out into the community. But as I mentioned, it's all new now, and the only donated meals that I know of are restaurants who have been specifically funded and tasked with producing meals that get distributed, as opposed to providing extra that they would otherwise throw away.
Mm. And someone mentions there's a federal Good Samaritan Act that protects businesses from liability.
Yes, that
And
is correct.
yeah, so most places don't know about that. How can we get that word out?
Really, I think that there's a connection between what the nonprofits are already doing. So organizations like ours, or the food banks, or Food Rescue US, is trying to educate the public and retailers and restaurants as to the Good Samaritan Act. Obviously, it's something that all of us as citizens can do as well. In particular, now that we are operating, hopefully, and we can operate from home, it does potentially allow for some more time again to cultivate some relationships and ask questions of our local restaurants and ask them what they are doing, what they're able to do, and at the same time educating them as far as the Good Samaritan law is concerned.
And someone mentions that local CSA sites are gearing up to be able to offer contact-free delivery. CSAs are typically very cost-effective and keep dollars local. And many farms that offer CSA shares in turn donate their excess produce to food pantries. And on the Fairfield town website, if you look up local food, you'll find some information on the local CSAs that are available. So we do
It's
have.
also worth considering that, if possible, it's a great opportunity to work with a farmer where you can actually pay them for some of those foods that end up in the food pantries. So you can potentially get a group together and sponsor a number of CSAs for a food pantry to distribute to their patrons, or talk to a farm again about purchasing it, maybe getting a special. I know that we always try to do what we can to keep dollars flowing to our farmers and restaurants and retailers. And certainly in these times, it's more important than ever.
Um, Someone suggests that we should connect with chambers of commerce and our economic development, and maybe Rotaries, just to let them know if we can do this sort of presentation to them, let them know about the Good Samaritan law, let them know about these ways of getting food from businesses to the people that need it. Um, so maybe there's something that the Sustainable Fairfield Task Force can work with you to make that kind of thing happen.
Sure. Absolutely.
Let's see. Did I lose her? Oh, Carrie had her hand raised. She wanted to ask a question, but she's no longer with us. Sorry. I had all these people in Q&A typing away. Yeah. So hospitals, schools, caterers, there's lots and lots of opportunities for this to happen. I think the prepared food is a bit different than the packaged food. I think that's where it gets a little tricky, is my understanding.
But again, I would also add that some of that thinking is definitely important to do, but these times are unusual. And I think that I can say for myself, we really just don't have a lay of the land. And so I don't know what kind of excess anything is out there for donation, um, as opposed to a requirement for purchase. So, for example, if we use what's happening at the top level, which is the food banks, as a guide to what is potentially happening more closely at the local level, food waste, it seems, has been dramatically reduced. Again, I don't have any data to support that at the moment, but the food banks are struggling to find donations themselves. And so, um, I think it would be helpful for us to have a better understanding of what is straining the distribution system and what kind of extra food is out there in the first place, and then figure out how to get it from point A to point B.
Um, and you had mentioned there your organization sort of does a matchmaker kind of program where it can take people that are interested in helping organizations that aren't necessarily very large but need help getting food to the needy. How exactly does that work? Could explain that a little more?
Sure. So, as I mentioned, each food pantry or community meal program has at least some idea of how many people they see every time that they're open. And as you can imagine, they need to have enough inventory to cover the demand as best as possible. And what is great about this matchmaking program is that it ensures, to the best of anyone's capability, of course, that that agency is going to have enough of what it needs to distribute out to people. And it also allows for a great line of communication so that if the patrons of that agency are asking for a particular product that is hard to come by, then the group that's adopted that agency can work in partnership to try to source that product together. Um, so, and like I mentioned, it's an opportunity, for example, for a congregation or a group of individuals to pool their resources, and to be very targeted. So, for example, it might be that one agency needs 100 boxes of pasta. And so it's more efficient for a group to buy cases of pasta and have it shipped directly to that food pantry. And so that is the mechanism by which we are connecting congregations that are looking to support people that are in need of food with a particular agency so that they can work together and in partnership. And it's working really well. And what's also great about it is it's nice to have that relationship with an agency, and hopefully one day when we're able to travel freely, it's an opportunity to visit the pantry itself and, basically continue that relationship going forward.
So you're with the Greater Bridgeport Council of Churches. So do you only work with congregations? What if I live in an area where my neighbors are you're on some two dead end streets and we're pretty cozy with each other. Would we be able to band together and do something like that?
Absolutely.
Because like we don't
Absolutely.
have
Yeah.
any really an organized thing. We won't have even a name of our group. We're just our neighbors.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. And that's why I was so grateful to be able to present for Earth Day, because the only reason why at the moment we're doing it with congregations is because we already have a membership of congregations that are part of the council. So it's kind of an easy lift. But I'm interested in connecting any group with an agency. And so, yeah, all you need to do is find that group, and I'd be happy to share suggestions of where, again, to source food for that agency. And I am also able to connect groups directly with agencies. So I work with, now there are probably about 21 or so that are definitively active in food distribution that are part of what we call our hunger outreach network. And once we connect all of them with a group to help, I can then turn to the Connecticut Food Bank and they can help expand our network of options. to other agencies that I might not have a personal relationship with. So yeah, I'm looking and happy to make those connections for anyone and everyone who's interested.
And so are you doing it just in the greater Bridgeport area, or you got throughout Connecticut, or what's the area you will cover for this matchmaking kind of process?
So in normal times, our agencies are in Bridgeport, Stratford, Monroe, and we also work with Operation Hope in Fairfield. But we certainly can connect groups with other agencies, again, that we may not have a personal relationship with, but we're happy to help with the research. I know of other agencies that, just as a colleague, not necessarily in the same kind of relationship that I have with the agencies that I just mentioned. So I can certainly get people started, and then, and then they can go from there.
That's great. And did you say that you'd allow us to share your PowerPoint on our website?
Yes, please. Absolutely.
And perhaps maybe before we load that one up, we could add that inverted triangle that you were talking about in terms
Yes,
of the food waste. That would be, I think, really helpful for people since it was.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I would encourage all of our participants to think about too, again, what is waiting for us on the other side of the part of this pandemic that requires us to stay at home. I think, there are going to be a lot of us that are facing some economic challenges that we never imagined we would. And I think it's going to challenge us to really brainstorm as a community to bring everybody to the table and ensure that everybody has something to eat. And I think we're going to end up reinventing what that means for ourselves. So
Yeah,
I encourage us all to think about it.
one of the things you and I had discussed before to set up this meeting was the concept of, there's the stigma associated with asking for help, and sometimes people don't come to ask for help, and helping people get over that so that it's okay for them to say, I need the food. I can't. And the idea that there's extra food or the clothing, and then they can save the money for the rent or the medical expenses. Do you want to?
Absolutely. I know that some of the things that we talked about in food insecurity work was that people are more likely to avail themselves if they go with a friend. So that is one way that we can make sure that people are taking advantage of these opportunities. And also to keep in mind that sometimes, and this happens, that we see this again in normal is a relative term at this point times, but people don't necessarily need to rely on food pantries or community meal programs indefinitely. And in fact, they are an opportunity for people to be able to transition out of needing that resource by using that resource. Like you said, Mary, and like I mentioned in the presentation, that if you can offset your costs for a time period, it allows you potentially to build enough savings that can help you to weather subsequent months as you're rebuilding your savings or searching for a new job or whatever it might be. It's not necessarily forever. And it's a great resource that people should really take advantage of when they can.
And so when you go to the food pantry, do you have to prove that you need it? Like how does that work?
No, typically, you need the most documentation that people are interested in is where you live more than anything else. Very few agencies are going to ask any questions about whether you need it. They may ask the question and then you answer it. You don't have to provide any documentation to prove your need. You need only express the fact that you in fact need it. And now during the pandemic and during this especially during the stay-at-home phase of it. Um, it's a totally different system than it was beforehand, because everyone is trying to minimize contact. The process of getting to the pantry, picking up your food, and leaving is done as quickly and efficiently as possible. So whatever time might have been spent with filling out intake forms and all of that is out the window at this point.
So why does it matter where you live?
Again, during these days, I doubt anyone's asking. It's a way for the agencies, and again, it's really the food pantries to manage their inventory. Um, there's always a fear of running out. And so different agencies, and it all depends on the agent. Some that don't, that will give food to anybody that comes in. Others that will only service people, for example, the Monroe Food Pantry only services people that live in Monroe because, again, they're just trying to make sure that they have enough for the people that come.
Oh, I see.
So if you were to go to their food pantry, every food pantry will not let anybody leave without anything. But that they'll do is they'll say, here's food this time, and here are the places that you can go for next time. And that usually is how it goes.
Okay. Do you want to talk at all about your mobile food truck that you have and that the upcycling that your group does?
Sure. The upcycling is what we do with our social enterprise. So we were very lucky to receive some seed money from Recycle Connecticut Foundation to experiment with creating food products out of recovered produce that we collected from a partner grocery store. We work with the ShopRite in Milford. The gentleman who owns that and several other ShopRites has been an incredible partner in the work for us. So we make these products, and we also use this social enterprise as a food business immersion program. So we bring in two of our culinary graduates to work alongside of us for 6 months. And they not only have access to this recovered food to think about their own product line that they might want to develop with it, but they also are trained in everything from scaling recipes and packaging and labeling and the permits that you need. And then they sell at a farmer's market with us to learn about getting customer feedback and selling and all of that. And then at the end of 6 months, we give them each $1,000 to invest in their own food business. We're hoping to grow the social enterprise because we want to first make that recovered produce available to area residents to start their own economic ventures if they so choose. But also, we hope to be a living wage employer ourselves in our use of recovered food. And then the mobile truck is exactly what it sounds like. It's a produce market on wheels, and we sell out of it just like you would sell out of a food truck, but just selling fruits and vegetables. And we were selling in both Fairfield and Bridgeport. Now we're just selling in Bridgeport. And then we'll probably expand again once we get through this portion of the pandemic. And we're hoping to carry some local products on it. Uh, but as you can imagine, the key component for us is affordability for the areas that we're serving. It's a tricky balance to be able to ensure that farmers getting a fair price and that we are able to supply the food at a price that's affordable to the people that are buying it. So our truck accepts cash, credit, and debit, but we also accept SNAP, which is supplemental nutrition program, or what was formerly called food stamps. So that's helpful. We have an EBT terminal on the truck, and so people are able to buy fresh produce from us that way.
So you are currently selling in Bridgeport right now?
Yes, we are.
Oh,
Yep, we have, and if you go to our Facebook page, Feed Mobile Market, I believe is what it is. I should know that, but clearly I do not. You'll see our schedule. So we have 6 stops that we do over the 5 days of the work week.
oh, that's great.
Yep, and stops around Bridgeport. And yes, we're still selling.
Great. Um, I haven't seen any other Q&A or chat. Um, Everybody loves your presentation, Michelle.
Oh, well, thanks.
Lots of good,
And thank
good.
you so much, Mary, and for all of the hard work that you and the World's Earth Day committee have putting on this week-long celebration. I think it's wonderful that we're still having these conversations, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing the creative solutions that our community comes up with to reinvent what the food system is now, and then when we see what awaits us when we're able to leave our homes.
Yeah, well, I mean, Larry is the co-chair with me of Earth Day, and community and the youth are the two main foci, I guess, of Earth Day. And so we really thought it was important to kick off our first webinar to focus on community, and specifically, several people had brought up food as a concern in terms of access. So thank you for walking us through all of this. It was very informative and eye-opening. And I hope people will get in contact with you to get a group together or their congregation to adopt a food pantry. I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. I hope so too.
All right.
Well,
And
thank you so much. I look forward to dropping in throughout the week and learning more myself.
yeah, lots of fun stuff going on for sure. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.